Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Revell are one of the oldest manufacturers of modelers in the Western world, tracing their origins back to 1943. Like Airfix, they have had a turbulent history. Originating in the US, the company has acquired other companies, the most notable being Monogram in 1986, but then dissolving and passing between several owners. The European branch produced their own toolings before actually splitting from the US company in 2006 for a brief period of time before reuniting under Hobbyco ownership in 2012. This has led to the persistent myth of there still being two separate Revell companies, the US and the European ones, which hasn't been true for over a decade. Since 2018, the company has been the property of Quantum Capital Partners, and it's carried on many of the practices which have earned it a poor reputation amongst modelers. Today I'm going to be looking at 10 things that I think Revell need to do to get away from that burden and refresh its business to compete in the 21st century. As it now has new blood in the company, in the form of Luke from Airfix, who have already done much of this, let's hope we can start to see some of this happening soon. Now, this is a minor niggle, but Revell has a bit of a mixed record on box art. It varies from the very good, dynamic art of subjects to the rather suspect, uncanny valley quality of a barely passing grade art student. I've mentioned before that the box, both its appearance and quality, are actually pretty important in modelling, and you might disagree, but I've seen the evidence for that in retail. People are swayed by marketing. It's why companies do it. If they weren't, they'd save their money. Box art is the thing that grabs people's attention in a store or even online if you don't already have a firm idea of what you want. Or even if you do, a nice picture can divert you. How many times have we all been down internet rabbit holes because of that? Now, as they are already capable of doing this right, it shouldn't be a big step to make it consistent. You don't have to be a subject matter expert to see a piece of art that doesn't quite work, you just have to be human. You don't have to be a military enthusiast to see if a picture is exciting or boring. Checking this sort of stuff is very easy. Artists are plentiful, and if you get some good ones, I'm sure they will be very grateful for a steady stream of work in this current financial climate. Revell already have a really good, consistent look to their boxes and brand. They're distinctive and recognisable. They just need to ensure that their art says buy me and not ugh. How model companies love us to use their paints. This practice stems from the early days of modelling, before a lot of dedicated paint companies sprang up offering much superior products at similar or even better prices. Tamiya are probably the main exception to this rule, having a unique and widely praised range of paints that have stood the test of time, and ICM are also starting to establish themselves in this field too. For those of you who are interested in that, I'll have a video on ICM paints coming soon. Revell paints, however, seem very much like an afterthought. I know of people who have used them and even quite like some of them, particularly their aqua range, though my personal experience has been pretty ropey. I find their consistency highly variable, from okay to that of setting plaster, and their colours generally uninspiring, though coverage seems generally pretty good. What's almost universally decried about their paints, however, are their terrible pots. Now, generally, if most of an industry follows a certain path, it's because it works. Occasionally, a manufacturer introduces a new product that innovates in some aspect of a product that gives them a competitive edge, and then generally the rest of the industry copies that to stay up. Revell tried this with their square pots, making something different and distinctive that would not tip over so easily, with a lid that fixes to the pot. This sounds great, but in practice, it simply doesn't offer any advantages, and is actually worse than other packaging in several ways. Let me explain. Firstly, the pots are big and bulky, and aren't really any harder to knock over than a regular pot in any meaningful way. Being different to every other paint pot means bespoke racks or separate storage, and they take up a lot of space, often at a premium on a modeller's bench. Opening them for the first time is an absolute faff because of the labels, which need cutting on both sides, and even on subsequent uses they're often not easy to open. Attaching the lid to the base is kind of awkward too, and doesn't really offer many benefits for the brief time it's going to be there. What's worse is that it can be difficult to remove, with a much greater risk of spilling paint when doing so. The seal on the paint isn't good either, and the large surface area of the pot means that they can easily dry out faster than other paints, which may be a big contributor to that inconsistent paint consistency. Compare that to a Humbrol, AK or Vallejo dropper bottle, or an ICM paint pot. All are simple and easy to undo and use, and they seal well, meaning they don't dry out. They're a consistent diameter, making storage easy in one paint rack. I've only spilled one of these pots in hundreds of uses over the past year, and that when I was putting a load of paints away after I'd been messing about with them for a video and I forgot to put the cap back on one. So not even a regular usage issue. Whilst I understand the idea, it just doesn't work, and whilst I appreciate they've invested in the system, sometimes you just need to cut your losses and admit defeat. All companies like to maximise return on investment. They do exist to make money after all, but there comes a point where certain products can look like greed. Such are the special sets Revell has issued in recent years, with a prominent example being the ridiculously priced 1/72nd scale Eurofighter. The Technic range, like the 1/32nd scale Spitfire with lights and sound, are really aimed at younger modelers, but the price points are really for experienced older builders. Platinum sets include photo etch and other items, but at a premium price, and I'm really not sure if the general uptake of these sets compared to the standard kits justifies their existence. I think Revell need to drop the expense and investment in these special sets, and instead take a leaf from ICM's book and look at how to sell the same kit in a multitude of ways to appeal to a broader audience. In my opinion, ICM are one of the best companies out there at the moment for doing this, with multiple variants of a base tooling that will appeal to many different users, or even have the same modeler buying the same kit a number of times. Many of the Chinese manufacturers like Trumpeter and Hobbyboss are also very good at doing this. Modelers aren't looking to Revell for a book on the Eurofighter, and probably not even photo etch, which comes at a huge price hike. Most will wait to see what the base kit is like and then decide what aftermarket items they wish to buy for it. I would much rather see Revell invest in more new kits than trying to sell ridiculously price-inflated products that I see a tiny market for. Many new or returning modelers start their modelling journey with a starter set. It contains the basics for them to try to reignite their passion for the hobby after all, and at a lower price than buying everything individually. Unfortunately, Revell starter and gift sets are generally bad, and the real problem is you really don't know which are decent unless you know the hobby, which those these are aimed at don't. As such, these feel like cash traps for the unwary. Now they suck in several different ways, but one area they are superior to Airfix in is in their cement. Revell sets usually come with a small precision poly bottle, which is about the best thing in there. The paints are usually mini plastic pot types that are almost always terrible, and the paintbrushes they supply are absolutely dreadful. The best thing you can use these for is to get rid of the brush end and use the stick for stirring paints. They're that bad. Finally, the reason you actually bought the set, the kit, is generally going to be an old tool, and may well be bad. It's not chosen for how easy it is for a modeler to build, it seems to just be chosen as the cheapest option available. This means a newcomer or returning hobbyist's first experience is likely to be a poor one, and if it doesn't put them off the hobby, it's almost certain to put them off Revell as a manufacturer. The real shame is that Revell has plenty of toolings in its inventory that would work really well as starter sets and provide a positive entry to the hobby. With a bit of thought and care, they could make some really good starter sets with minimal investment, something that would reap rewards both short, medium and long term. Additionally, investing in specific starter kit tools like Airfix have done over the past few years would go a huge way to reinvigorating their brand, rather than relying on ridiculous £99 special sets. One thing I was really surprised about when I did my "What is the best model company in the world" videos was the variability in Revell's product price ranges. Revell has some very reasonably priced 1/72nd scale aircraft, for example, yet its 1/72nd scale armour is some of the most expensive on the market, unlike its 1/35th scale AFV range, which is very affordable. Simply put, compared to industry norms, Revell is all over the place, creating a weird, inconsistent and highly variable view of its products. Add the ludicrous pricing of its special sets and the high pricing of platinum editions, and there's no real theme to give Revell a market reputation. They're not a premium company, despite having some very expensive products. They're not a budget brand, despite having some cheap ones. They're not middle of the road because their pricing is all over the place. I think they really need to decide what reputation they want to develop and work to that. Having worked in company leadership for many years, it seems to me this hasn't been done, with individual pricing and product decisions left to individual line managers, which is a terrible idea for any company. Now I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have supported me directly through YouTube memberships and Patreon. This really does keep the channel going, and without you it would be very difficult for me to be able to continue doing this. Now if you're only just seeing your name on here for the first time, it's because I update this monthly, and if I've prepared some videos ahead of time, then there may still have the old list on, even if the list has been updated since then. Don't worry though, your name will get on the list and will continue to appear throughout your support. If you are considering supporting me, YouTube channel membership is by far the easiest way to do this, since Patreon is becoming a more challenging platform to engage with. Whichever you choose, however, I absolutely appreciate your contributions, and don't forget to come and check out the private members Discord, which you get access to at any level. Now since Luke came on board, we've seen Revell do some of their own social media stuff, but let's face it, they are not good at it. They have a WhatsApp group that is read-only, and is in German, a language only 6 countries in Europe have as an official language, with German speakers making up about 13% of the European population. Compare that with over 82% that speak English, and you can see the general and social marketing issue. The other piece of this is cultural. I worked for a Japanese company that, like many other Japanese companies, had its European headquarters in Germany. The reasons for this are both economic and cultural, since both the Japanese and German cultures have a strong heritage in precision engineering and a very fact-based approach to sales. The problem is, most of the rest of the world doesn't, and very successful Japanese companies tend to adopt Western practices or employees to penetrate these markets with, for want of a better phrase, a more American approach. Now of course employing Luke, who has worked for a more culturally Western company in this space with experience in social media and turning a traditional brand into a relevant modern manufacturer, is a great first step. But he has a couple of problems. First, he's one person, and any individual's capacity is limited. Secondly, he's part of Revell now, so anything he says on social media will be viewed by modelers through the lens of, he works for the company, he would say that. With that then, what should Revell do? Well, I think you can see where I'm going here, and it's a pretty obvious step, one that both Airfix and ICM have been doing for a while now. That is to engage the creator community. That's not just because I'd like to get my hands on new Revell kits hot off the press. Of course I would, but that's not the reason for this. The reason for Revell is twofold. Firstly, creators are independent. When ICM send me a kit, it's without any strings attached. I can say what I want about it, and I do. I give you my honest opinion with no check or anything from ICM before I put a video up. They see it at the same time that you do. Secondly, there are many of us. If you don't trust me or like my style of videos, there are many others who will review the same kit. If 80% of us say it's good and 20% say it's good but, then chances are it's a good kit. Same for the reverse. As such, people trust creator voices because we're both independent and numerous. It's why things like Trustpilot work, because although there will always be a fanboy or a hater, with enough people their voices are marginalised so you get a proper assessment of the products and services being offered. Now imagine Revell send out 20 kits to 20 different creators and we all rave about it. Do you think that might have a better impact on sales than if they just released the kit? How much do you think that costs them? Certainly less than the price of a single advert in a single magazine or website with far greater reach. This is why social media is so powerful and why Revell really need to engage with it properly and not just fart around at the edges doing the odd webcast. Engage creators, do interviews, send out review samples, let the creator community become your voice. Of course, you need to have products that you can stand behind, which will then take us to the next items. The problem with my prior point is that you need to have a product that your customers like in order to utilise the power of social media. Now if you don't, then social media will work against you without you engaging it anyway, so this is a higher priority, and the most universally hated part of any Revell kit is the god-awful box. I've gone over why end-opening boxes are bad before, but if you've never heard me say it before, I'll recap. Firstly, they're weak. They have a single thickness of card on every surface, and the structure is held together by folding tabs in at the ends and a single jointed edge. This means they can sustain much less abuse or weight, meaning you can't stack them easily in a shop, for example. Second, they've got terrible reusability. They don't ever fully seal, so if you use them to store components during a build, they can escape through the gaps. You're also limited by the size of the end opening, and the larger it is, the weaker the box. Top opening boxes have none of these issues. Finally, Revell tend to use boxes way bigger than actually needed, which exacerbates the weakness issue and also introduces a greater possibility of things being damaged from rattling around inside during transportation. You see much less of this practice from any mainstream manufacturer these days. The last point here is that Revell have used top opening boxes in the past, but they reverted back to this poor habit. So come on Revell, ditch the end opening boxes and give us better. More than any other manufacturer, I have bought more new Revell kits than any other, only to open them and find they are actually a rebox tooling from a different manufacturer. Not only that, but I bought new labelled Revell kits to find they are actually an ancient tooling with new decals, so not new at all. Sometimes this is combined because an old 1960s monogram kit is new as a Revell boxing, leaving the modeller out of pocket and angry. Not a great brand association. That happened less after I started to hold off buying new Revell kits until a magazine had reviewed them, and then since the advent of the internet and scalemates, I've not bought a single kit from Revell without checking its provenance beforehand. And that is the real issue here. Not that Revell reboxes other manufacturers' kits, most if not all manufacturers do that, nor that they box old toolings, but it's the lack of transparency. We can find that information out anyway through scalemates. It's in the public domain, so all Revell are doing by keeping it hidden is duping the unwary. Now many manufacturers do this, but Revell have probably the worst reputation in the industry for a lack of transparency, and if they want to change their fortunes around, that has to become a priority. Wariness around a company, that lack of trust, delays adoption. People wait and see, making new product launches slow to gather steam, which allows the market to move on. Imagine if ICM releases a 1/48th or even 1/32nd scale Gloster Meteor 2 months after Revell. If people have been waiting for reviews before they buy the Revell kit, the ICM kit could then already be out, and reviewed by creators receiving the samples, before most people have parted with their money, potentially diverting those funds to ICM instead of Revell. That's the worst possible outcome for a company with a new tool, that they don't recoup the costs in a short time, meaning they're looking for other ways to do that instead. If people had trust in the brand, they'd possibly even pre-order it. Look at how Airfix have managed to turn those fortunes around for itself in the last decade. So, come on Revell, tell us what the age and origin of your kit toolings are on the box, and regain the trust of your customers. Speaking of the age of tools, Revell has one of the largest back catalogues of tools of any manufacturer in the world. Unfortunately, it often cycles old toolings, like the dreadful 1/32nd scale Corsair I covered in this video here, into their main releases. As in the last point, there's no transparency about that, it's a case of caveat emptor, buyer beware, leading to that lack of trust I mentioned. Now Airfix were very guilty of this up until about a decade ago, when they stopped this practice and created the Vintage Classics range. Now some of those kits are still awful. See my recent review of the Bristol 192 Belvedere if you want a very current example, but at least you're not going to accidentally buy that kit thinking it's a brand new model. Instead, it's a piece of history for those who want to build for nostalgia or challenge their model skills on a kit made with obsolete technology. Creating a similar line for Revell would help. Retro Revell or some such. Clearly putting old tools into their own category with their own pricing structure, so that people know exactly what they're getting. This would also help in re-establishing that lost trust in the brand and help people differentiate between current and old toolings. Speaking of current toolings, it's an obvious one, but the number one thing Revell can do is invest in making new models that are up to current production standards. They did this once before in the late 1990s, and these kits still hold up today as some of the best ones that Revell have produced, and they are now currently being reissued. Kits like the BV222, JU290, HE177, 1/72nd scale U-boat Mark IX, and so on. The number of new tools Revell has put out each year has declined in recent years, and those brands everyone is talking about are those that are making new, exciting and innovative kits, like Airfix, ICM, Ryefield Model and so on. Revell need to generate that same enthusiasm and excitement for their new announcements too. Revell have released their 1/144th scale U-boat recently, and it does look like a great kit. As soon as it hits my shelves, I'll be doing a full unboxing and build video on it, that's for sure. Recently, we've seen them re-announce the 1/32nd scale Gloucester Meteor again, and from initial impressions of the research and scans they're doing, it looks like they might indeed be investing in the same way Airfix has done. This is great, because they really need to show that they're doing something new to get people to trust their brand again, and see them more than a meh manufacturer somewhere in the middle of the pack. Anyway, let's all cross our fingers, because I'd love to see Revell climb back to give Airfix, Eastern European and East Asian companies a run for their money. Competition is a good thing for us, because it means more choice and better standards. Everyone wins with a renewed Revell in the marketplace, so let's see what the rest of 2024 and beyond brings. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think Revell needs to do to bring itself up to the current market standard, so please do put those in the comments of the video below. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous, then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.